Good morning from Christchurch, New Zealand. We're on the South Island of New Zealand. In particular, we're at Sumner Beach. It's a suburb just outside of the city of Christchurch, where we have been for the past 2 weeks. Currently trying to stay out of the wind here in this little cave, actually above a giant cave below me, which is Cave Rock here on Sumner Beach. Really cool. Beautiful beach here, lots of surfing happening. The clouds just rolled in this morning. It's getting a little overcast, but it was a beautiful clear sky to wake up to this morning. We've been here for 2 weeks rehabbing a van, turning it into a camper van. That is where we will be living in our time here in New Zealand. And I just wanted to let you know all the costs and logistics associated with living in a camper van here in New Zealand. Now, one of the things you'll often hear about New Zealand is how expensive it is to travel here, which makes living in a camper van during your time here one of the most cost-effective ways of traveling New Zealand. You can rent a camper van, or what a lot of people like to do is buy a camper van and then sell it when they leave. It really depends on the length of your stay, and for shorter durations, less than a month, I would say, renting a camper van is the way to go. We planned on being here at least 3 months, probably longer now that the coronavirus is spreading all around the world. There's 0 cases of coronavirus here on the South Island of New Zealand and only 6 cases on the North Island. So it really is the best place to be right now for the current situation in the world. So we have 3 months on our visa. It's technically not a visa. It's called an ETA. I think it stands for Electronic Travel Authorization, something like that. And just fill out the application online, and then everything's online. You don't get a stamp in your passport or anything like that. So we have 3 months on that, and I believe we can renew it for another 3 months, something like that. So right now in the month of March, here in New Zealand in the Southern Hemisphere, it's actually autumn, moving into the winter months. So it gets less tourism and typically less traffic in general, although the state of the world now, there's a ton less traffic, and they're instituting travel bans and stuff like that. They just instituted a self-quarantine policy of people coming in, I guess starting today. You have to self-quarantine yourself for 2 weeks. So the weather has been pretty crazy and schizophrenic. One day it'll be nice and mild, 75 Fahrenheit. The next day it'll be in the 50s. So you're getting big temperature swings from day to day. Although today it's starting out pretty nice. There is an abundance of camper vans for sale here, especially now since it's the end of the summer travel season. Everyone's going back home and selling their vans. So there's a ton of different options to look at. And we actually ended up looking at like 5 or 6 different vans. It was pretty overwhelming at first because there's wide varieties in prices and mileage and options on the van. And so when you look at what's available, it's kind of overwhelming to think about what are my priorities, what do I actually need, what is the cheapest I can get for my requirements. But this is a nice little cool sea cave complex here under Cave Rock here on Sumner Beach. Ultimately, what we settled on was we found an old tradie van. That's what they call them, like a work van. People, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, they call them tradies. So we found an old carpenter van for sale that still had like shelves and carpeting in it for a work type situation for only 3,400 New Zealand dollars, and that seemed like the best deal for us because compared to the other vans that we had looked at, it had the lowest mileage, and we figured even if we had to put money into it, given the lower mileage and the kind of good condition it was in relative to the other vans we saw, we figured we'd be able to get back at least some of our money. And even if we only get back half of what we paid on the van and put into it, we're still saving money versus renting, where if you rent for a long period of time, or if you rent for any period of time, you're not getting any of that money back. So even if we got a couple grand back for this at the end when we leave New Zealand, it still works out way cheaper than renting a van. So we bought this old Carpenter van for $3,400, and at the time we didn't really know what we were in for in terms of making it something that we could live in. Oh man, this is pretty cool. I'm in this sea cave now as the tide's coming in, this cave rock here. And I think at lower tide there's a big entrance on the parking lot side, on the land side, where you can come in. But now that the tide's come in, you can't walk through here. So I have to like rock hop back and have to boogie out of here before the tide gets too high, I think. So the cool thing about New Zealand is they have a ton of free camping for camper vans. They're called Freedom Camps. And the only caveat to that is you have to be a certified self-contained camper van. Now there's certain requirements in order to get that certification. So we had to build out the van with these exact specifications that are required so we can get a certified self-contained camper van sticker and permit, and that enables us to camp free in any of these freedom camps. And one of the things that we had found when we were looking at vans is that a lot of the vans for sale had been certified self-contained under the old requirements. They had recently updated the requirements, and so we thought if we bought something certified under the old one, we would have a hard time selling it because it possibly didn't meet the newer requirements. So that was another reason why we wanted to do it ourselves, to build it to the current specifications. Mainly the special specifications are it has to have a portable toilet that you can use with the bed made up. It has to have like a sink and a stove, and there's certain requirements in terms of the drainage into the gray water tank and air fittings and stuff like that. So it was a little overwhelming at first because we didn't know exactly. We wanted to make sure that we would meet those requirements and pass the inspection and not have a big deal. It turned out we got a lot of help from a local store called Burns Co., which is like a camper van specialty store. They sell a lot of things, parts and stuff like that. And the guys that worked there were super helpful in telling us what we needed to do and telling us the cheapest way to do things that would still pass the certified self-containment inspection. I'm really enjoying hanging out in the sea cave, but I probably should make my way back to the top of it before I have to go for an unintended swim this morning. Yeah, it's really cool. I'm really enjoying this part. This is a beautiful beach. It's a little cloudy now, but man, tons of great surfing apparently. And I think the sun might poke its way out again, but we'll have to see. So this area of New Zealand is actually still recovering. Several parts of it are still recovering from an earthquake they had a few years back. So you can see a lot of buildings have been torn down and rebuilt. And some of the older buildings kind of in the downtown square area are still being rebuilt and rehabbed, and a lot of areas are not being rebuilt at all. So we got the van for $3,400 New Zealand dollars, which works out to be about 2,300 US dollars. That's where things begin. And when you start a project like this, there's a ton of stuff that you overlook, and the stuff starts adding up, and eventually we thought we were going to put maybe $1,000 into it, and we ended up for the build out spending about $1,500, and that includes the materials, that includes stuff like fixtures like a sink, tools. Needed to get tools because I didn't have any tools, and again tried to minimize those expenses, so I only bought like a cordless drill, like a $30 cordless drill, a $30 cordless jigsaw, because in order to make the sink you have to cut a hole in the bowl and put the drain in there. You have to cut a hole in the countertop here. So I know I needed a jigsaw for that. I could have used like a circ saw or something like that, but I pretty much used a hand saw for all the big straight cuts. So just tried to minimize the tool purchases because I knew we'd be spending a lot of money on like sheets and bedding and pillows and mattresses, and we did a good job of getting a lot of stuff off a site called Trade Me, which is kind of like eBay, but it's more of a local thing. We utilized Facebook Marketplace. We utilized as many different avenues as we could, thrift stores and stuff like that. For the material for the curtain, we got this brand new curtain material, super cheap at a thrift store. They call them op shops here. But so 1,500 US dollars for all the materials for making the van livable, the framing, the wood, the plywood, the flooring, the bedding, the stove, the stuff we're required to have, like the water tanks, the gray water tank, the fittings for those, the toilet, the portable toilet. You're required to have a portable toilet, but what we found with other people selling their vans is nobody uses them because there's good facilities at all the campgrounds. So you just have it to pass the inspection. You don't actually typically use it, especially when you're in a small confined space like this. It's a chemical toilet, so we didn't want to mess around with that. So we have it to pass the certification, and we have it to sell the van with the certification and with the required materials. And I think that the toilet itself was like 120 bucks, something like that. Additional expenses that we didn't foresee initially were the pre-purchase expenses of pulling the CarJam report. CarJam is like Carfax in the United States. It gives you the background history of the vehicle, and we spent about $70 on those, on multiple vehicles, pulling the reports. It'll let you know if the odometer's been rolled back, if the mileage is not consistent with what is reported on the report. It'll let you know if it's ever been totaled out. A lot of the vehicles come from Japan, are imported from Japan, and so to get the Japanese report, there's an additional expense, and then to get the Red Book value, which is basically the same as the Blue Book value, you have to pay an additional expense for that. But all told, for the different reports that we got on a couple different vehicles, we spent about $70 on that. We did a little bit of maintenance. It needed an alignment when we got it, so we got an alignment. We had to put some oil in it, so that was about 30 bucks US. And then we needed to get insurance, and they have AA here. Instead of AAA like you have in the United States, they have AA here. The good thing is, if you already have a AAA membership in the US, you can just do kind of like an add-on with their AA policy they have here. And that's for stuff like towing and stuff like that. And that was an additional 500 bucks, including the insurance and the AA membership, the add-on AA membership, because we already had AAA. But that insurance is for 12 months. So when you don't use the full amount, you get prorated back, so we'll probably end up getting back 300 or 400 bucks depending on how long we use that insurance. So all in, with everything we spent on the build out, the insurance, the maintenance, the pulling the CarJam reports, the total of everything, including the cost of the vehicle, $4,208. If we can get half that back, the more we can get back, the better, but that is cheaper than renting a van. If you rent a van, you're looking at around $67 to $70 a day. So renting a van for 90 days, 3 months, you're looking at, $6,000. The benefit of buying something is when you're done using it, you get money back. So it reduces your daily cost per day, which if you're renting something, you can't do that. Again, that really only works out if you plan on staying several months. If you're just here for kind of like, I would say less than 2 months, it doesn't work out as cost effective, but I mean, you still get money back if you can sell it. So that's really the benefit of buying something. The problem that we ran into when looking at several vans is a lot of them are high mileage. So we really lucked out finding this one with the low mileage and made it worth it for us to build out ourselves. So while we were building it out, we stayed in an Airbnb for 2 weeks, and they were super flexible about letting us work on the van in their driveway and letting us borrow an extension cord when we need to. Unfortunately, they didn't really have any tools that we could borrow, so we had to buy what we needed as we needed it, the hammer, cordless drill, stuff like that. So in the end, 4,200 bucks, and just the cost of my own labor, putting the labor into it myself. So if you're not technically inclined, if you don't know how to use power tools, a saw and stuff like that, you might be better off buying something that is already built out. The one thing I will say is a lot of the vans we looked at that were built out by the people that were selling them, they kind of did a crappy job. They were kind of just stuck together they weren't very stable. They kind of used like some vanities and some shelving and some dressers, and then maybe like a foldable futon and stuff like that, and it was kind of like a wonky setup, so it wasn't that stable. The benefit of doing it myself is I know it's super stable, and the one requirement Sam had was it has to be more stable than our bed in LA, because I put that thing together with different pieces and it would always creak a little bit. And I will say, I'm proud to say that this bed is way more secure than our bed in LA, so that works out. Obviously, there's additional charges for stuff based on what recreational activities you want to do. If you're going to go camping or hiking, you might need tents and sleeping bags, which we haven't gotten yet. Or if you're into surfing, buying a surfboard or wetsuits, stuff like that is not factored into this. This is just living in the van, getting it certified, self-contained. There's also a little bit of charge involved in passing the inspection. You have to pay a registration for the self-contained, and that was around $50, $53, just to pay the fee to get certified. So if you buy something that's already certified, you don't have to worry about that. So it's really depends on your skill level and your budget, whether you do it yourself. I think we made out really good with the amount of money we put into this versus what was available for sale. They were not that clean and they were kind of wonky setups, and I know that this is super clean because we ripped everything out, did it ourselves, and from the underflooring to the ceiling is super clean. It's super set up, and feel confident about living in this in the long term. One last thing I'll mention is driver's license situation. You're allowed to drive on your local driver's license from your home country. You're allowed to drive on that for up to a year, so no need to get a New Zealand license if you're here for less than a year. So if you have any questions on anything regarding acquiring a van, building out a van, let me know in the comments down below. Plenty more videos coming from New Zealand. I hope this answered your questions on what the experience was like for us. In the meantime, get out there, find your adventure, and be infamous.
Infamous.